Welcome to Screw the Commute, the entrepreneurial podcast dedicated to getting you out of the car and into the money with your host, lifelong entrepreneur and multimillionaire, Tom Antion.
Hey everybody, it's Tom here with episode 629 of Screw the Commute podcast. This episode's on how to be a great interviewer. Now, I was talking to a client in Australia yesterday, and we were talking about podcasts and that she needed to learn how to be a great podcast guest. So I told her about episode 211, which was how to be a great podcast guest. And then we got talking about having her own podcast. And she asked me if I had an episode on how to be a great interviewer. And I said, well, guess what? This is going to be it today. And this is from my perspective and what I do to prepare for an interview. But I'm going to go one step further. I'm going to try to get an interview in a future episode with Judy Jernid. And she had a talk show in Los Angeles, and I think she interviewed a couple presidents. All right, so keep an eye out for that episode. Now, I got to tell you that starting your own podcast can open doors for you and let you reach and get to know people you could never reach. Many of the big names in your industry got that way because of publicity. In other words, their name got passed around. So you will be able to get to them on your podcast because many of them are publicity hounds. Anyway, I have other episodes talking about the value of podcasting, but I just want to remind you of it here so you see the value of being a great interviewer. And you'll hear about what the guy from Entrepreneur Magazine said about me. All right. Hope you didn't miss episode 628. This was all about your website time on site, how you get people to stay on longer. See, the longer somebody stays on your site, the more likely they will be to spend money with you, and the more the search engines think your site must be pretty darn good if people are staying on it so long. So that was episode 628. And you get to a back episode like 211, how to be a great podcast guest, and 628 by going to screwthecommute.com/ and then the episode number. That was 628 time on site and 211 for how to be a great podcast guest. All right, now a quick update on our program to get scholarships for persons with disabilities. One of the people has already started a website to help other people with disabilities. I'm so proud of him. Another is totally revamping her husband's construction website. And remember, those two people I just mentioned are blind. All right, amazing, very inspirational. And the third is a school teacher, and she's moving right along with her studies and even being more into it now that the school is out. So we'd love to have you help out with the second round of financing for this by going to screwthecommute.com/disability to help out with the GoFundMe campaign. I can't remember if it's disability or disabilities, plural. But anyway, go to one of those sites, and we'll have it in the show notes when I figure this out. And you can just click on it and go over there. And anything you can kick in is great. And hey, if you're really flush with cash, we want to get 2 more people into this pilot program and then roll it out really big to companies and foundations to help loads and loads of people with disabilities. So check it out. All right, let's get to the main event. Let's talk about what I personally do to prepare for an interview. And I'm pretty sure I'm considered darn good at it because one of the big honchos at Entrepreneur Magazine, who's interviewed hundreds of times, said, and this is, I don't know, this is a paraphrase, but I'm pretty sure he said I was the best prepared host he'd ever been interviewed. All right, something like that. It was close to that. Now, to be a good host, first of all, it's way easier if you recruit great guests, okay? If you take anybody as a guest and they suck, well, it makes your job way, way, way more harder. I mean, they may give one-word answers, and you have to keep digging and digging to get them to open up. Now, I'm going to talk about researching your guest, but this is another reason to do a really good job of researching the guest. They might give one-word answers on most of the questions, and that makes it really suck. But if you know enough about what they are passionate about, you can sometimes steer the interview that way, and you'll probably be surprised that they went from the worst guest ever to being animated and interesting. Anyway, it's still better to start with a great guest, especially until you get more experience. Now, where do you find great guests, and how do you check them out? Well, the National Speakers Association in Tempe, Arizona is a great place to start. You can go online and research all these people, and they all have big mouths, right? All us professional speakers have big mouths, and they have all kinds of topics. And if they're good enough to be a pro speaker, or at least want to be a pro speaker, they probably love to hear themselves talk. They probably have some clean humor and good stories, and all that makes for a great show and makes it easier on you, by the way. Also, there are podcast matching services like podmatch.com, where guests and hosts can list themselves. Most of the guests have sample interviews, so you can see what they sound and or look like if it's a video interview before you book them. And there are podcast booking agencies where guests pay to be on, and the agency always wants to find bookings for them, and this costs you nothing as the host of a podcast. Okay, the next thing I do when considering a guest is I Google the person's name and the word scam. And then I do it again with the word ripoff. And then I do it again with the word complaints. And guess what? If I see a whole bunch of results, and in some fashion they're saying this person is not a scam, pretty much you can bet they are a scammer. Okay? They manipulated people, probably affiliates of theirs, who would make money if you bought something from the scammer through their links, and who will say anything nice about the scammer just so they can get the commission. You got to run from these guests. See, if you put them on and they rip off your listeners, you're somewhat responsible morally for promoting them. And you'll shoot your reputation fast, and your show will tank once word gets around you promote ripoffs. So don't do that. All right. Now, if the person passes that test and there are no really bad legitimate complaints about them, then I'll listen to a few minutes of them on someone else's podcast. I rarely have a guest on that has never been interviewed before. See, I have a high-quality show, and I can't afford to have people on who either suck as guests or start spouting crazy stuff that I don't believe in. Right now, that's not to say I won't have a legitimate debate. I mean, I've had SEO people, that's search engine optimization people on, and other than, I've been around since the beginning, 28 years and a half now since the commercial internet started. So it's hard to put anything over on me, all right? I've been there, done that. So I used to be a big believer in SEO and was one of the best in the country for a long time. But I quit, I know now 7-8 years ago. It's just not worth it to me. But I'll be glad to debate SEO people, and that makes for a good show. But I won't promote people who are yapping about weird stuff that could hurt my audience if they did what the person was saying. So you want to listen and see what they're about before you put them on your show. All right, once the guest is booked, I will start researching them more deeply. I'll dig into their website, and many times I'll find obscure facts about them that no one else bothered to look at or bring up during an interview. So I was doing an interview one time with a big shot author, and, after doing 630 some episodes, all right, as an interviewer and 1,000 interviews that I've been on personally, I kind of know if someone is just calling it in, or, they're just, it appeared that they're just going through the motions to get, access to my people, and then they'll go on to the next interview and never think twice about me. So I brought up an obscure passion of his that I found in my research, And you would have thought a different person all of a sudden sat down in the chair and was in the interview. All right. He lit up like the White House Christmas tree. And he went on to a much better interview. And when it was over, he asked me how I knew about his passion. And I just said, it's my business to know. And I left it at that. Let him wonder. Now, sometimes the guest will send you questions. You don't have to use these questions unless the guest demands it and you have agreed to it. I've only had that happen a few times. I mean, they send me questions a lot, but very few, unless they're a really big shot, don't demand that I ask those questions. But I've had it happen a couple times, and I think I agreed to it once or twice because I was under the gun to get the next episode out, and I didn't have as much time to prepare. And believe me, that's going to happen to you in the future. You know, when you crank out as much 3 times a week I have for 4 years, you got to really hustle. All right. Now, if they do send you questions, it's a great help to you, especially if you're a beginning interviewer, because you don't have to think up everything on your own. You can also depend that if they gave you the question, they ought to be able to give you a good answer, right? That's good for your audience. And if they can't, well, I guess either they're a moron or their publicist gave you the questions and they didn't bother to look at them before the interview. All right. Now, the next thing I do is research out any humor about the topic we're talking about. All you have to do is Google it. For instance, let's say my guest is going to talk about small business accounting. I would Google accounting humor. Now, I didn't find this exact piece of humor and I use it all the time, but I took the idea that I found on Google and adapted it. So here it is. All right. So I might say, if you spend $5,000 on a website that I could show you how to make for $150, you have to net $4,850 just to get back to being broke. So yeah, might not be knee-slappingly funny, but when you use humor, as I've taught, thousands of speakers to do, and it applies to the topic, it doesn't have to be, comedian level to get the point across and add some fun to your interview. Now, after you do this for a while, you already have your go-to humor ready for all kinds of topics. Now, and one of my favorites, and you're welcome to steal it from me because I stole it from Google somewhere. So when we're talking about productivity, so here's what I say. Hey, I saw a sign at a company that said, we give 110%. Yeah, 10% on Monday, 15% on Tuesday. And that's the end of the joke right there. It's funny as heck. So, all right, let's get to the next issue that's the mark of a beginner interviewer that you just don't want to do, is don't just half-heartedly agree with the guest all the time. I can tell a beginner interviewer a mile or 10 miles away just by their response to the guest's topic or point that the guest just made. So here's an example. Let's say I just gave a really great tip to the audience. And I might add, I always do when I'm pushing towards being a great guest all the time. That's why I've been invited back to some shows like 13 times. Some of the top shows in the world that usually only have somebody on once, I've been on twice and in their classics. Entrepreneur on Fire put me in their classic interviews. So that's what you want to shoot for. And that's episode 211, by the way, screwthecommute.com/211. Anyway, let's say I gave a great tip and the interviewer just says, that's really great. And then they move on to something else without commenting and adding value to my tip. That's the mark of a beginner. You don't want to be that person. Maybe you could recap the tip so the audience hears it twice. Maybe you could give an example of how to apply the tip specifically to your audience. Just don't say a pitiful, wow, that was really good. Never thought of that. No, that doesn't make you a great interviewer. Another thing you can do is add your experience. Now, I'm assuming if you want to be an interviewer that you either know a lot about the topic or you want to learn about the topic. Now, I know a guy who wanted to know about Bitcoin stuff. So he started a podcast from the Bitcoin, let's say, dummies point of view, and he had guests on the show all about Bitcoin stuff. And he asked questions a typical Bitcoin newbie would really ask, and he has a very successful show. Now, I've been around a super long time in the business world, so I've got tons of things and stories I can add to my interviews without taking the spotlight off the guest. When you're listening to other podcasts, you'll see is the host just ego-driven and the guest is just there, just to have somebody to talk to and tell how great he is, the guest or the host is. No, you want a nice balance there of you're doing the show for a reason, to prove your credibility or to learn stuff or whatever. I mean, we always want to make money with stuff that I promote. But, the guests took their time to be on your show, you should make them look good. Or unless they turn out to be an idiot, then too bad. Don't even show the episode or put the episode on. But anyway, as you get more experience as an interviewer, things the guest says will trigger info from your past that you can pop into the interview right there. Or I make notes during the interview so that I can bring something up later, let them finish their point, and then I bring up that thing later that I would have forgotten about if we just went on forward with the interview. So I might say something like, so wait a minute, I just jotted a note down here, Sally. You said X, Y, and Z a few minutes ago. Well, what do you mean by that? Let's go deeper into that, or something like that, so that I don't forget about it. I make a note to myself to, unless time is running out or whatever, I might skip it, but at least I have something to relate to. And it also shows that you, the interviewer, are in the moment. You're actually listening and absorbing. And this, your audience will thank you for this, because they might have been in the car and they kind of missed what she was talking about, and you bring it back up and they can dig deeper and get it, say this on the second time around. So I said about listening to other podcasts. So what I suggest you do is listen to other podcasts and start critiquing the interviewers in your mind, or jot it down. You'll pick up great tips from the great interviewers, and you'll see things that are annoying and stupid that you can then avoid from the terrible interviewers. Okay? And another thing, when you're listening to other podcasts, pay attention to the sound quality. See, if you have great sound quality, new listeners will automatically think you're a great show and a great interviewer, because your sound is as good as the other great shows they've listened to. So cheaping out and trying to do a podcast on your cell phone, and yes, you can do it on rare occasions after your show has built up tons of credibility. You can do one on your cell phone from the beach or from somewhere. But starting with poor sound quality is instantly going to make people think your show is rinky-dink and that you are too. So in a moment, I'm going to recap everything for you on how to be a great interviewer. And then remember, I'm hoping to get Judy Jernett on here for part 2 of this topic on how to be a great interviewer, because she's done thousands of them in the top media market, or one of the top in the world. So now, if you want help with all this stuff, check out my mentor program. It's the longest running, most successful, most unique, most well financially structured for you, so that I'm not going to disappear or take your big money and disappear on you. We have an entry fee, and then I don't get my big money unless you make money, and you're not stuck with me forever because it's capped. Once I get with you for, our program runs for at least a year, and all the way along, if you're making money, I make some more money. You make big money, I make some more money. And then once you reach a certain level that you've paid me, you don't owe me anything else. And I still keep helping people that have paid that money over time. So it's extremely unique. No one on earth will put their program up against because I'm a crazy fanatic to help you. And that's the way I roll. All right, let's recap how to be a great interviewer. So pick great guests. National Speakers Association, a good place to look to start, and different services. Make sure they aren't scammers. You don't want to get a bad reputation for your show. Google their name and go deep into the search results, 10 or 20 pages. Now, this can be done very quickly. You'll start skimming stuff that, sometimes a person's name is kind of common. So you might want to go to their social media to be able to lead you to all the other stuff being said about them. Now, on really big shot guests, go really, really deep, because they hear the same questions over and over, and you're not going to impress them by doing the same questions everybody else does. But by knowing more obscure things, you can get really cool interviews out of big shots. And I listen to as many of their older interviews as I can to pick up stories and facts they probably forgot about years ago. Okay. Review the questions if they happen to send you questions. Make your own list of questions. And don't just say pitiful things in response to their great point. Make sure you can piggyback off of it or recap it. Add your experience whenever possible. Research humor on the topic and pop it in at appropriate places. Listen and critique other podcast interviewers. And make sure your sound quality is good. And pretty soon, people will be begging to be on your show. All right, that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. I will catch you on the next episode. See you later.